Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. If you heard anyone talking while the intro was playing, that's my guest, David, who I'll introduce in a second. I asked him to not talk while it was paused, but already he doesn't understand the rule. So this is going to be excellent. Okay, well, on today's podcast, I'm delighted to welcome David McPhee after I just roast him. He is a Canadian certified counselor, a registered counseling therapist, and certified clinical hypnotherapist. With over 20 years of experience, David has worked extensively with individuals, families, and couples, bringing expertise in family systems therapy, crisis and trauma counseling, and cyber counseling. However, it's not just his impressive resume that brings David to our show today. His personal journey with speech fluency disorder at early childhood onset has profoundly shaped his perspective on mental health and therapy, making him an inspiration for anyone facing challenges in their pursuit of well-being. So I'm so excited to have David come on and share his story, as well as being a male therapist. You are literally my first official man therapist on. So that's going to be really cool to get your perspective in that way. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Kieran. Yeah, I just wanted to break a little bit of the rules because everyone else is following those. So I just figured, I have to be the odd one out in some way. So.
I was so distracted with, I have a little device here, getting the recording intro on. I, walk you through. And then all of a sudden I'm like, why do I hear someone talking? And I look up and you're talking to me. Oh, well, I'm glad that you're talking. And it's the scariest is always when your guest doesn't talk. So I haven't experienced that yet.
Okay.
As you politely put your head right into the mic and answer. This is going to go really well. Do you have a place for your hands? Do you know where your hands are supposed to go?
I do. I'm going to pull a Ricky Bobby and just hold them up on my face the whole time and just, look really like right at you with the hard eye contact as I do it. No, but thank you so much. I actually have heard a few of your podcasts, so I'm actually quite honored to be here.
Aw, that means a lot. I appreciate that. I'm really glad that you've listened. Thank you for that. And I'm also glad that you agreed. So that's always great when I reach out to a potential guest and say, I'm thinking of this crazy idea. Do you want to be part of it? And it takes one crazy with another crazy to make the kind of crazy we do on this show. So I appreciate you as well being here. Okay, well, today's episode is about you and your story, your journey as a therapist, as well as your own barriers growing up as a kid. So I kind of want to get right into it because I have a lot of questions for you. I've known you for many years. We worked in a professional setting for a long time together, but I don't feel like I know you in the way that I'm going to get to know you today. So I'm excited because...
Well, you made that pretty clear, Kieran. When you just you drew those hard boundaries of, after I leave, don't call me. Yeah. If you see me in public, just don't acknowledge, head down.
To you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that, I really appreciate what you're doing here because I think it's great to be getting that kind of the message out, but also the way in which you're doing it, where you're talking about issues that most people have shied away from, and only recently have we started to shine a light on these things. And so I think it's great that you're being so open and so honest and really talking about these things in an open form. And so it's great.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad. And I am grateful to be able to do this, and I only can because folks like you agree to come on and be brave and share your story. And we always say if one person benefits from an episode, then that's job well done times 100 gold stars, right? Because you maybe have helped someone by coming on today that might listen on the other end and say, oh my goodness, I can relate to this man here. Yeah. I can relate to what he's saying. Maybe that will inspire me to want to talk to someone. And it's not always about reaching out to therapists. I think we have to be in a place to seek therapy, but there's so many other things that we can do before seeking therapy that allow us to build awareness, talk, even just like, all these thoughts that we have in our head, they got to come out, man. Otherwise they come out in a hard way.
And in like a lot worse ways, for sure.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I can talk to one kind of individual and they can
my one listener.
No, I'm here.
Joe,
so like,
who's listening if you're here? Maybe your wife. If I'm lucky. Yeah.
Well, no, she's will be, but
but
for a whole other reason about making sure I don't say anything like really bad or things that shine in a bad light. She'll be like, okay, I don't know him. Yeah.
No, we it's gonna go well. Okay, well, help me understand, like what initially sparked your interest in wanting to get into mental health and sort of led you to go to therapy school?
So I was never part of some, like, whenever you hear therapists like things and they talk about when they get into therapy school, because I'm going to use that, 'cause I absolutely love that. But you always hear like, oh, like I just knew from an early age I was going to do that. And I honestly had no clue. Like I was born into a family that was we really didn't talk about things. We really didn't talk about things like mental health or addiction or anything like that. Without those topics were always like, we don't talk about that. Yeah. We don't talk about it with other people. Yeah. If you went to therapy, it was a sign of weakness. And so really like my kind of growing up was around learning how to talk with people in a sales kind of way, because that's what my parents would do. And they would learn how to like engage individuals in a way that would try to make them seem more favorable and being able to be like, oh, hey, let me talk to you about something, and learn how to engage them. So I learned a lot of those skills from my parents. When I was younger, it became very evident, probably after the age of like 4, that when I would speak, it wasn't like everyone else, right? Like there were what are called blocks, which is what people who have a speech fluency thing, they will get caught on a word, or they'll get caught on a way where they can't say a certain word, or like an S word or like an H word. Okay. And so for all of my childhood and for a lot of my like adult years, I would be stuck on words, and it wouldn't be like a t or a s. It would be like I'd be talking and then I'd get like a pause. Okay. And then there'd be a huge pause, and then there'd be an even longer pause. And as the pause got bigger, it would just get more and more awkward. Yeah. And so my parents took me to some of the best speech pathologists. Yeah. So you heard it there, with the P. And it's really hard because, the way in which they do things is they teach you all these kind of tricks where it's like, oh, well, if you just kind of ease yourself into your words, it's easier. And, if you talk like this and very soft and so, it's just like very... You
sound like a creep.
Let me do therapy. Like, it just sounds so horrible. I'd be like,
where's the nearest exit? Although that's a very nice voice to like do meditation. Well, you could record meditations if you wanted to.
Thank you. You're going to. This podcast is an introduction to my ASMR. Please listen for more. Right? No, like it's things like that where you can, ease yourself into the words, and you even see where I like ease my whole body into it from that kind of training. But I think I didn't fully understand what was going on for that speech thing until I learned that it goes hand in hand with your kind of mental health issues. When you start to recognize and you pull back that kind of big curtain and you go to see a therapist and you it's uncomfortable and it's awkward and you sit there. And I always maintain that anyone in this kind of field, they need to go and experience that, because then you know exactly what your client is feeling in those moments, because it is a vital part of what we do is knowing that, oh, hey, I need to look at myself here and I don't really want to do that. Yeah. So, so like for a lot of my upbringing, it was like, avoid this, don't talk about it, don't share with others. If someone calls you on it, just, like you almost raise your voice like another octave higher. Like, no, I don't have. Like, what are you talking about? I don't have a speech impediment. No, it's not right. And then like makes people go, oh, okay, that I'm feeling like I'm gaslighted here now.
Like, what did I not just witness you taking a few minutes to say that word? Like,
Yeah.
did you find that with the space, as you said, there are times where there'd be a longer sort of space? Do you feel like people were filling that for you? Like, and then so did people start talking for you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, especially with my upbringing, like, and again, like I see this a lot with a lot of other young people because they come in with anxiety or things like that. And parents or kind of the caregivers or friends, they're doing it with the best of intentions. Yeah. They don't want to make you feel bad, but what happens is when they do that, then you feel even worse because you're like, oh, I never, I wasn't able to actually say what I want to say. Yeah. But I think really like as I said, before I went into the kind of a counseling school or the therapy school, I really didn't, I kind of viewed my I was going to say, I viewed my hardships or these things that I had, the things that I had gone through as a, these things make it, or these things make me less likely where I could be a therapist or less likely that I could help people. Because really that's how I got into this was just wanting to help people. Right. So I started off, sorry, I'm going like all different kind of
No, you're doing good. You're actually staying on, you're way better than I am. I would ask you 20 questions in one, but you're coming back to the point.
But yeah, so where I started actually was when I was 16 years old. I got the opportunity through an organization to go on a trip to help install water filtration systems down in kind of countries that had either a natural kind of a disaster or something like that. And really nice. Basically, I got that job because my mom was like the national director of it. So
okay. Nepotism at its best, I guess. Right?
Absolutely. Hey,
the other poor kids that wrote a 17-page why you should pick me to go do this. No, clearly no. It's just this guy because his mom is a high-powered woman here. But I got to go down there, and it was really great because I got to help people, but I also got to see a lot of the inner workings of things, right? So I'm not going to say what the organization was, but the help they were offering were only to a certain type of people who had a certain kind of a certain belief kind of system or things like that. Mm-hmm. And it was really quite hard because I didn't think it should be that way. Mm-hmm. And so working through all that stuff, my whole goal was I just want to help people. And then that led into, high school and then university and, why don't you take a psychology class? All right. And learn how to help people that way. And then got roped up into that, became the president of the behavioral sciences. I think it was Behavioral Sciences Society. Okay. Which I thought was hilarious because it's the BS. Yes. Yeah. And I was like, great. So I'm the president of BS. Great. But that turned into a bachelor and like an undergrad. And then, went into that kind of went into the field, working with child and family, which was a great job. And then working in other kind of organizations. And that slowly led to me, working with a lot of other young people and whatnot. But where things kind of changed was when I hit like 25 to 30, where in a job interview, and I had went on countless kind of job interviews, the person who was interviewing me actually called out my speech impediment. Oh. And he actually looked at me and said, so you have a stutter. Like I hate the stutter because they named it something that people who have it can't say. Which is really challenging. That's pretty well said.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
But he actually...
Middle fingers up to that.
He actually called it out and said, like, you have this. How are you going to use it? Yeah. And that's the first time anyone ever called me on it. Wow. And I was just like, I don't freaking know. Like, I've never been told about this. I just tried to ignore it. And throughout that time there, I was taught that, no, don't ignore this. This is what people need to hear and what they need to see.
So all your life you're trying to hide it because that's what you were taught. Hide it, fill the space and gaps in with something else, and then are entering mid-20s to 30s, and you're getting a whole different idea or twist to what you should be doing. Like how was that hearing someone go from don't ever talk about it, hide it, to excuse me, you should embrace this or start the conversation with it?
Awful. No, because it was a challenge. Like it was a, hey, like don't run from this. Don't run from who you are.
Yeah.
Because this is what makes you you.
Yeah.
Like if we're trying to act the same as everybody, no one's unique. Right?
Yeah.
So don't try to make yourself something that you're not.
Yeah. What a powerful message though.
Oh, totally. But when I was, when I first heard this in my mid kind of 20s, I was like, no, I can't. What is this kind of stuff? Like I can't do that. I can't be open and honest. And I still remember the very first time I brought it up to an individual who I was working with, and I was so nervous. I was just so like, don't say anything. Like just, so my name's David and I have a speech impediment. And most people didn't care.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, great. I'm here to talk about me. So could you just hop down off your soapbox? And,
my turn.
Yeah. Like, okay, great. Like you say that for your own therapy. Okay.
Enough about you, more about me.
But it's so funny because what ended up happening was through that process, I got more comfortable with talking about not only my speech impediment, but talking about my own struggles with kind of mental health, my own hardships around anxiety. When you can start having that vulnerability with people, you actually bring it into the conversation, and then people feel like they can be vulnerable.
Totally, yeah. Well, and would you say that you feel more in charge when you're working alongside your disability versus working the opposite, hiding from it?
Absolutely, because then you are able to control the narrative, right? So I often turn it into a, I talk, so often when I'm doing any kind of a presentation or like talking to individuals or anything like that, I start off with, okay, you're going to notice 3 things about me, right? And it's kind of like this kind of entry thing of, I wonder what he's going to say.
Yeah.
And so I start off with, you're going to see that I talk with my hands a lot, know, and I move around and I look around the room and they go, okay, yeah. And then I lead into you're going to notice that sometimes I'm going to have trouble trying to get the word out, but just, don't worry, I'm not having a stroke, I just need to get the word out. And then once it's out, it'll be fine. It's something I've lived with forever. And I think when you phrase it like that, there's like an openness of, okay, this guy's being really genuine.
Right.
And so if he's being, it's that old saying, game recognized kind of game. Like if this guy's being open and honest, then I should be open and honest too.
Right. Yeah.
And in actual fact, it turns into a superpower where then I can say, hey, this is a place where we can share open things. I'm going to be open with you. I want you to be open with me. Yeah. And oftentimes that makes people feel more likely that they can talk about hard things, right?
Well, I bet walls go down, right? And doors open because you're usually, as a therapist, clients may think that you, the therapist in the room, are holding position of power. And in many ways you are.
Oh, absolutely.
However, the client really gets to, once you figure it out when you're sitting there as a client, you realize you really get to decide what you want to share, how you want to talk. And if you have a really good therapist, they'll hold you accountable for all the lying. I would bullshit a lot, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm great.
I don't know what that's like because I'm not a really good therapist.
Right? They call you on it. But I would be so much more open, sitting across you, knowing this guy's got his own shit too.
Yeah.
And he's the professional, and it doesn't take away from you not knowing how to do your job. That's that. If I'm going to sit here and judge you for that, that's a whole different conversation that I'm getting. I'm choosing to be ignorant. It's you're not a bad worker. It's you are getting words out that take a few minutes longer. And when you put it out there, I think then, like you said, we go with your narrative versus creating our own assumption or story about what's this guy's problem.
Well, and I think oftentimes, especially like if you run into a kind of a block or like you get stuck on a word and there's that pause, some people might well, often people will throw that back on themselves, being like, oh my God, look, I've thrown this guy something he's never seen before. And now he can't help me. Whereas I think if they know that up front, it's, oh, okay. Well, or maybe he's really just kind of trying to think about it.
Right.
And so even going back when I would hide it, I would become a master at, trying to find another word, right? So if I'm having a bad S day or a bad H day, okay, what are some other words that I can use that would say that same thing, but I can avoid that. And I think that's very hard as a therapist, because in your therapy school, they teach you how to join and how you have to use the client's language. And so then if I can't say that client's word, I'm not going to make that same kind of a rapport, right?
Yeah.
So like if someone says, oh, I'm trying to think of a word now and I can't see, like it's on the spot, but being able that you can use that client language is such an important part of therapy, because that's how you join and that's how you build that kind of a rapport.
Right.
And if I can't do that because I'm so self-conscious about, well, he said hope and I can't say hope, so let's think of, what are you passionate about? Well, no, that's not the same.
Yeah.
And you go on in your head for like an hour about this, whereas really it's like, hey, let me just try and have this conversation.
Yeah.
And let me use this word, and then
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just so remarkable that your upbringing, you were taught to not say the words, to hide it, to not acknowledge some deficits with talking, and then you grow up and your job is to be a talker, right? Like a therapist, you're talking. You're not you're not sitting behind a screen all day. You're literally in hours of therapy with clients or groups or presentations where you have to use.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Your nemesis is your superpower. You can go whatever direction you want. You can use it as you're the supervillain, or you can use it as, no, I'm actually the superhero here, where I get to use that to my advantage.
Yeah.
Have you ever used your disability to your advantage in a way that you're not proud of?
Well, let me just see. The statute of limitations is up in, no. Yeah, like I think there's time, like, I think there has been times where, you kind of use things to excuse kind of a behavior, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, not so much my speech, but definitely my like ADHD and my anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I often, in the past, I had used that as I can't do that because I'm just like I have anxiety,
right?
And we can't do that, even though the way you get over anxiety is exposure. But let's not go there. But no, but it's just like I think a lot of times it's easy to say, oh well, I have this, and oh well, I guess that means I could have very easily said, okay, well, I have a speech impediment, so I can't be a therapist. I can't help people in that way.
Yeah.
And that would have been an option, but because I feel so passionately, because I have spent years and did a lot of education and did all these things because I feel like this is what I'm called to do. Mm-hmm. I still feel very kind of passionate about it.
Yeah.
I still often will look back and say, what if I had kind of done something else? Like, what if I helped people in like a different way? Like if I build houses, that's still helping people. That's still doing stuff. And I don't have to talk. So, but I don't think it would have been I guess kind of what I'm trying to say is the way I'm doing this job now, I feel helps not only myself, but it helps others as well, because it helps them to shine a light on things of, hey, like what things are you kind of hiding from? Like what things are you avoiding?
Right.
Because it's easy. I could have easily avoided this for the rest of my life and there would have been no issues.
Yeah.
But having to stand up and say, no, I'm going to challenge this. I'm going to fight against this. This is where I have to try to work through these kind of things and kind of lead that way.
Well, and it is, I use the word remarkable, and I feel like that's your word, because I have had the privilege of knowing you for, like I said, I don't know, quite a few years, and at least 15. And from
God, that's a lot.
I know, right? You're getting old, David. From when I first met you to knowing you now, I feel you have captivated your speech impediment in a way that you manage it so well. Like, I don't even recognize, like, I don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah.
Where I remember when I first met you, it would take you a while. You were nervous,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And like you said, if your anxiety's stepping in, and if it's connected to other parts of your day, if you're not in the best place, or you're nervous, or
Oh, for sure.
I'm imagining that would impact you. And I'm sure 15 years later in the job that you do, you still get nervous, you still get anxious. Like, we still feel those things, but
No. It's all gone now.
Yeah. You're never anxious ever. You've cured anxiety. Yeah.
Please look for my book that'll be coming out in the next few weeks about how to cure anxiety.
Chapter 1. I did it.
No, exactly, right? No, but it's something that will always be a part of me, always be there. And it's just something that I need to acknowledge.
You've done it so well, because when I think of you as the man that would be building houses, I would think, oh man, you would lose your light, because you're such a funny person, as we're all acknowledging, so many minutes in now. You're funny. You have this sense of humor. You have a presence. You do talk with your hands constantly. However, I feel like if you were that builder, it'd be so sad, because your personality and who you are would have been lost in all of that, because you wouldn't be the talker, and you wouldn't be the person who you are. I see when you walk into a room, like, the room lights up, and people light up.
You.
And my experience, it's true. I watched you work with very challenging, complicating issues with young people and their families in the realm of crisis and suicide. And you are a master working with the parents, and particularly the mothers of some of these clients that are also managing very complicated mental health issues along with their child. And I've never seen anyone other than you do it so consistently, where walls come down quick with clients and their parents, because you bring this strength to the room that nobody else can compete with that, because, well, who's going to compete with David, the guy that says, if I look like I'm having a stroke, right? Like, you got to try following that act, right? It's not going to happen. So I think it's lovely that we have folks like you in this field that choose to, as you say, be vulnerable alongside your clients. And we're not saying your clients are taking care of you. We're saying you're opening the door to what vulnerability can look like, and how one can be in charge while being vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, that's a great compliment. So I'm going to need a voice kind of recording of that, so I can just hear it back on my phone.
Hey, you can listen to the same episode over and over.
Whenever I'm having a down day, I'll just be like, oh, okay, play. Yeah. But I think, in terms of, because I know that it can sound like, oh, wow, this guy's putting a lot of stuff on his clients. He's going to talk to them. But I think it's more of that, it's trying to open that kind of door.
Yeah.
And saying, hey, because so often, I mean, one of the main reasons, at least in my opinion, one of the main reasons why people don't go to therapy is because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be kind of called down and, I got to go to somebody and say how crappy I am at doing this.
Right.
But I think if you can open that door and say, it's fine, we're human, no one's perfect.
Yeah.
It opens that, I can still have these two things be true of, hey, I'm a good person, but I've made some really crappy kind of choices or some crappy kind of mistakes.
Yes.
And I think that's what's key, because no matter, and again, there, I know there are a few people out there who probably have a speech impediment, but for anything, any kind of mental health thing, any kind of a disability, for lack of a better word, it's about being able that you can be open about that and say, this is who I am.
Yeah.
I can't change who I am, because Lord knows I tried for 25 years to be normal, and no, I don't have a speech impediment, And eventually it all kind of comes out. So own it and say, this is me. I have flaws just like everyone else, but let's do the best we can to work through them, to talk about them, to shine a light on them. And that's really the most important thing.
Yeah. Well said.
There we go. Okay, so
we're done.
We can end there.
Outro now. No, I will not have 2 episodes where I forget to do the MFU segment. That was just the one. So I was going to say, why don't we pause and do our middle fingers up segment?
Oh, I missed. we've been talking for so long. I just got right into it. Kim.
Well, I'm glad we
Sorry.
did. And that's okay. We sometimes start with it. Sometimes one episode was in like 45 minutes in. So did you bring something to put your middle fingers up to today?
I did.
Okay.
I did. I don't know when this is going to be released, but the wildfires in northern Alberta, my middle finger goes up to them because that is awful. I have a few people that I know who are up there and who have been evacuated, and it's just awful. So we are hoping we are praying, we are doing everything we can just because that's awful.
It is. Yeah. I feel very guilty even kind of complaining about the smoke that we're getting all the way out in Calgary because you're like, well, I'm still in my home. I still have, versus families that you're saying that have been evacuated. And
that smoke is bad too, though. That smoke is hard on everybody.
For sure it is.
I guess what is worrying so many people is that it's so early on.
It is, exactly.
Our year, and it's like, well, what else is going to happen? Like, it's just, and it's so tough. And so I just,
I hear you. That's
a big kind of
middle fingers up.
Middle finger for that. Yeah.
I'm with you.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's a sad one to talk about, but I'm glad you
it's a good one, right?
Yeah,
there you go.
Put some time. Yeah.
I get a check on that one.
Yeah, you
right?
did. You did good. You're welcome back again now. You did good.
Oh, now I think of another one. Oh, boy,
for the next one, right? I have to think of, next one you'll put your middle fingers up to me for just sitting here and being so mean to you this whole episode. Literally throwing you under the bus from the minute that we hit record. So I'm going to put my middle fingers up to, recently on social media, I had a friend who shared 2 disturbing encounters in one night that happened to him while he was dining out here in Calgary. And these incidents took place were deeply troubling as he faced public mockery, humiliation, and degrading treatment solely because of his Japanese heritage. So he had a woman come up to him during supper and learn where he's from, and then try to talk at him with fake Japanese made up words. Same night he had somebody humiliate him outside in public. And I had caught on a social media page, he had a sign up that said, "I'm proud to be Asian." Mm-hmm. So naturally I gravitate towards those. So I'm like, what's going on? And so, I don't know, I'm just going to take a moment and talk about racism for a second, because I think this resonates with my own experiences. And I'm sure there's lots of people out there that would say, yeah, me too. But whenever, I think he said it so well too, it's not about the incidents in particular. It's whenever someone that's experienced racism talks about it, we often encounter dismissive responses. Yeah. And it's not necessarily dismissive responses from people of visible community. It's usually white people. And it's usually things like, oh, it's not that bad. I can't tell you how many times you hear that. I think he's heard that.
One-off. Yeah. Or one kind of a bad apple.
Yeah, or even totally justifiable. Yeah. Then it's, oh, I can't believe that still happens. I think, or even worse, it's anyone that I'm telling. So if I'm telling you I have this incident that happened to me, a lot of times people can't handle hearing it. Yeah. And so then they make it about them, or they get really emotional and start crying. And then you feel like you have to take care of that person. And so a lot of times you just don't share and talk about it. But that's the problem, is when we don't talk about it, then people think it doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, and so, I just want to say, in such situations, what we truly need is for people that are not of color to engage in active listening and reduce the inclination to dominate conversations. I think it would be so helpful if I come and tell someone my story, or someone is telling you your story, just pause, listen to them, say less and listen more. And that's it. That's all. We don't need, well, in my generation, it wasn't that way. It's that's why we're trying to make changes. So if you were from a generation where racism was okay, you don't get a pass. Be better. There are so many times I have understanding and empathy for people, but I just can't get behind any time human rights impacts people. And it's about, this is a human rights issue. This person is a human. Yeah. And I'm sure you can relate in some ways too with your own speech impediment, or people thinking, whatever narrative they want to make about you as well.
and I think like even from like a few of the friends that I have who are in a minority, it's awful because it's still like an everyday kind of thing where it still exists. And I think exactly what you said, where it's like if we so many people, and again I'm gonna kind of generalize that it is mostly white people who say, oh yeah, no, that's so awful, like, and they don't really want to go there, and they don't really want to shine the light and say this still happens in 2023. We are still dealing with this issue that should not be.
Like, he's having supper at a restaurant, and he is not having a conversation with this woman who decides that she has a right to walk to his table, interrupt his meal, and then make these comments towards him. And you think that's not just one-off, quote unquote. That's a lot of people out there that are doing that. And
it's not okay.
It's 100% not okay. Yeah. It's not okay at all. And I think we have to challenge ourselves more. We have to stop when people are trying to tell these things. And I know my sister and I talk about this too. Like, she will also get friends that will say things like, oh, well, you don't have it that bad. Black people have it worse than you. And it's like, I promise you, visible minorities are not we're not competing to be like, I have worse treatment than you. Nobody is saying that someone has it worse when they say this thing happened to me. And so I think people have to start to recognize that those comments, it doesn't matter how good of friends you are. No. You can't talk like that to people. That's not okay.
And that's basically the equivalent of trying to rank someone's kind of trauma. Like, oh, hey, no, you were only like kind of traumatized in this way.
Yeah.
So it's not the same. Trauma's trauma.
That's right.
You can't rank it because for every person it's going to be a unique thing. But I mean, like, especially around that issue around race, I really find that it comes from a place of anxiety and fear. Like, people are afraid of anything that is outside of that norm. That's why when you have people who have any kind of thing that makes them not the typical way of doing things, or they always get fear, and fear gets met with this anger or this, oh, well, you're not like me, so and that is not what that's not what our world is. Our world is a melting pot of everything.
Yeah.
But I think it's just like, it is an issue, and it will be an issue until, as you said, and until we can open up and start talking about it and have honest conversations and say, so this is still happening. Yeah. What are we going to be doing about it? Because my hope would be is that if some other kind of individual were to see that in that kind of restaurant with your friend, that they would call that out.
But that's just it, is like, bystanders are the most powerful people in these situations. And when I had talked about that incident at the National, there were many bystanders. There was 3 or 4 standing at the bar where my sister and I were, where we were denied the drink because of our color, as he openly told us, and because our people don't tip, as he said. And
That's just such a dumb. Sorry, that's just such a. That's like.
Yeah, anyway, it is. But that's exactly it. It's like there's nothing that's gonna fit the realm of, oh, that makes it, that's a fair reason to talk to that person. That, yes, you should be racist to that person because they were mean.
I find that, like, even what we were talking about earlier, where it's like, in this kind of a typical box, I would not be doing what I'm doing because I shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. When you put people in a box, you are closing your mind to what they could offer, what they could do. And I think it's so frustrating because you see all of the benefits we have from having this kind of world where we are open, where we do share things, where we are able to, share kind of recipes from our culture, and you learn things that you would never have, that you would have never learned had you not been open. Yeah. And so when I hear stories about these people, I honestly feel bad because they're not even opening up to an idea of what our world could be or what it might be and what this person might offer us, right? Because when we only
just don't walk to their friggin' table. Turn around. Like, why? You know what? Why did you have to take it to that step? And anyone that's listening or or when you're in these conversations, for any of those people that like are rolling their eyes, like, oh, here we go again. That's also the problem.
Skip.
Yeah, right? Like, here we go again. It's not a rant. I'm not talking about my favorite TV show getting canceled. I'm not ranting.
Let's talk about that next.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Gosh, seriously. Why did Friends get canceled? But anyways, I do appreciate you allowing me to say that. And I also want to give my husband a shout out because I've been having conversations with him the last few months, and I am noticing Carrie and I have been together for 22 years, and the person I was when I met him too was I wanted to be white. So I married this white guy, and I wanted to be white so bad. I had a complex, a white girl complex, as I call it. And over the years, I think you start to realize who you are, who you kind of coming into your own personality, and you could start to let go of things that you wish you were and okay, this, like you said, this is who I am. So what am I going to do with this? Am I either going to enjoy it or am I going to fight against it? Yeah. And so in the last few years, even my dialogue is changing in how I used to be and how I viewed my own culture, to recognizing that I'm out of the wrong part. I'm out of the wrong thing here. And I got to do some internal work. But I've really been appreciating how my husband's been growing along with that, because we've had quite a few conversations the last little while where I've noticed he pauses and he will allow the space that I'm asking for to talk about my worry, about having an encounter or hearing from a friend that experienced this, or even just womanhood stuff. And instead of arguing it or what are the things we can do, say it's not that bad, be positive, whatever. I really appreciate that there's no need to jump to fix, and just staying with it for a moment and letting me talk about it, and we'll figure out what we need to figure out. But I just want to give Carrie a shout out here too. I think it's helpful when we're trying to grow. And I think we see this out, you probably see this at work too. You have young clients that you're working with, and maybe they're learning coping strategies, and their parents may not be in the place to move forward yet. And I remember my experience with talking to parents was, your kid is going to come home and have these skills that they're learning to manage their stuff. And you're either going to have to learn about it to help them, or they're going to surpass you. And then you're not even going to know them anymore.
Which often happens, unfortunately, too, because parents don't want to take that kind of leap with their or with anybody.
It's really, scary. Right? We don't agree with it. Whatever. They're angry. There's good enough reason for anyone to think why they don't want to move forward with something. And I'm just challenging the fact that if you know people out there that are stuck in there, don't get stuck in there with them. Don't get caught in their awkwardness because someone's saying a stupid comment and we don't want to make that person feel bad. Say something. You can be kind and say, you might want to check yourself before you wreck yourself.
You can do it in a kind way.
Totally. We don't have to be mean. I'm not asking any of us to be mean. Just help. If you're a bystander watching that, you have some power. And
absolutely. But it's always who will go first, because I think once one person does it, then you get the whole
domino.
Kind of, okay, hey, we can do this, right? But it always has to be that one.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to give a shout out to your husband for making that kind of comment, because now my wife is going to be like, how come you can't be more like Kieran's husband?
Well, that's a first, I'll tell you. If your wife says that, my poor husband has never heard that one before, because I'm always like, why can't you be more like Ryan Reynolds? And he's like, why can't you be more like Priyanka Chopra? Right? So
I figured you go with like a Beyonce or something like that.
I would love to put myself in that category. Yeah. Come to realize over the years, your ego has to be in check.
But actually, that actually brings up a great point where like we often talk about. I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube. It's a short film called "It's Not About the Nail."
No.
Have you ever seen that? It's basically exactly what you talked about, where a husband and wife are talking, and the wife is got a nail in her forehead.
Okay.
And she's just like, I just have this pain, this ache. And her husband's like, if we just take that nail out. And she's like, no, I just need you to listen to me. Like, don't try and fix it. And he's looking at her like, but if we just got that out, it feels good. But it actually highlights that kind of interaction, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's so important.
This need to fix something versus it's okay to be where you're at, but validate me.
Yeah,
that's all I want. And I think...
And just talk about those things.
That's right. Sure. So, So anyways, I appreciate... Andrew, who posted that. I think it takes a lot to not get angry and want to say bad things back. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
And kudos to him for using that as an opportunity of lessons, man. Can we all learn from each other? So
For sure.
Anyway, so thank you for being part of that conversation. I appreciated that. Enough about me. More about you. Let's get back to you. So
okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the speech fluency disorder. So you've said stutter, which I thought was really cute around why do they call it that? Is that what can people still call it a stutter?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's actually an association called the Canadian Stuttering Association.
Okay.
Which is actually, I mean, they do a lot of outreach work. They are great with like trying to kind of normalize it and say, here are the kind of facts. I know that I am a part of that association, but we don't have any big names.
Okay.
Because I know down in the States, it's much more open down there. President Joe Biden has like a speech impediment. Samuel L. Jackson, like all of these big names have it. And so I think the more that they're open about it, the more that they can talk about it is such a huge thing, because again, it pulls back that kind of veil over it and says, hey, let's talk about this. Right?
Yeah.
We can't just hide away from these things and hope that they go away, because that's not how it works.
No, it does exactly.
We have to talk about these things and
Totally.
address them.
Have you seen a change? Should a child today be experiencing struggles with speech fluency in comparison to when you were a child?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I guess between the ages of like 8 through 10, I could barely get through a conversation, or barely get through even just like a sentence. And as you can see now, it's coming out now. See, I'm getting more kind of comfortable now, so it's coming out.
So when you're more comfortable, it comes out?
Sometimes, or like when I'm talking a lot, it comes out. So like I always say, like at the tail end of my presentations, you're going to get a lot more of these things coming out.
Oh, interesting.
Just because it's that speech kind of a muscle and everything like that.
You get tired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also start being more mindful of it, like, oh my gosh, I've got through this whole thing without and then it's like, oh no, now I'm thinking about it, now I'm worrying about it, and it just kind of rolls downhill from there.
Right.
But I think back when I was younger, it was very much like, don't talk about it, you're going to go see this kind of individual, they're going to help you with your breathing and everything like that. And I think nowadays, even from my own experience, I've had people who have walked up to me at the end of any kind of a presentation or something, and they will honestly say, like, I thought I was the only one. I feel like I was isolated. I feel like I can't do this job, but now that I see you do it, and you do it kind of well, you've actually opened up this thing where I can actually see a future of me kind of using this as like a skill rather than this, hidden thing.
Right.
And I think that's really what I aim for, like around anything, around kind of a mental health or anything like that, is we want to start having those conversations, because the more we can open it up and kind of normalize it.
Yeah.
Not saying that, you want people to be like, oh, well, I want to get this too. No, like if you're born with it, being able that you can accept it and say, okay, I have this. What am I going to do about it? Right?
Yeah.
Because I know for years, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Like, people who are hearing this are like, David, no, I've heard him. There are days where I still get frustrated. And when I get a block and I go, oh, and I get angry, because it's like, if this would just go away, I just want to say what I want to say. But then it's going back to, this is who I am.
Yeah.
I can't hide it. Just roll with it. Eventually I'll get the words out, good things are worth waiting for, all those wonderful things that you want to say.
See, you're so funny. I think that's amazing. Thank gosh.
Yeah.
That you can, you make it safe and comfortable. I think you do. It's very clear that you do care about how people are in your presence. Yeah. And part of knowing you too, you care a lot about people, maybe even sometimes more about them than yourself. And so you want people to be comfortable. I would imagine, I don't even know your sibling history, but you're like a middle child, because you have that kind of mentality where it's, let me take care of everybody. And you're like, no, I'm not.
I'm not. No, I was the oldest. My parents used to foster kids, and
Oh.
so they ended up getting like I had 7 younger brothers and sisters, so I was the oldest.
The
So
caretaker.
so I guess you're kind
Yeah,
of right in the sense
yeah.
that that I was
Not
like
the middle,
the
yeah,
caretaker. Yeah, but
I'm the oldest too. We're the best.
I know. Well, I mean, really, I mean, once they got it done once, I mean, they really didn't
Yeah.
need anything else,
Yeah.
right? Even though my 4 younger brothers were not my biological,
Yeah.
they all went into hockey because that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, see? They should be thanking you.
Well, I mean, really, like I told them that if any one of them makes it to the NHL, like
Yeah.
I get a part of that because
That's right. Yeah.
because I was kind of a very like a very solid part of that.
Yeah. That's
upbringing.
right.
But
yeah, they ended up on the Canucks. Imagine.
I would love that, but
I would too.
I don't. Yeah, no. I think they're all out of hockey right now. Well, I think. I mean, they're all adults now.
Yeah.
So,
right.
yeah.
Right. Just the fun beer leagues now. You talked a little bit about how your disability was explained to you as a child and ways of hiding it. Like how would you talk about how it was explained to you?
It really wasn't explained to me
At all.
and I think
Yeah.
that's one of the problems, and that's why we need to have more conversations. Because had I known about it, that old saying, had I known what I know now,
Yeah.
because I used to like. And I used to grasp at straws. And anyone who had heard some of my random theories, like, oh, well, if I just drink a Coca-Cola, my stutter goes away.
Oh, yeah.
And people would look at me and be like, you're going to you're going to become a diabetic, man. Like, you're just crushing pop. And I was like, no, but it helps. Until one day, he didn't. Just see that nice little pause I did there, right? No, but like you kind of grasp at straws when you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I think once I learned more about it, because for most people, and again, I'm not a specialist in speech impediments.
Yeah.
This is just my own kind of research, but it is based in anxiety.
Yeah.
That's why so many people who have a speech impediment, the worst thing they have a problem with is when someone asks you your name. And so when someone says, hey, what's your name? You immediately get very anxious, and that's where a lot of blocks happen. So for a long time, I could not say my name.
Oh my goodness.
Because you get very anxious,
Yeah.
and what would happen is my anxiety would just go from 0 through 10.
Yeah.
Well, I'm usually like a baseline 5. So like it'd go from 5 through 10.
Yeah.
And I'd freeze, and I'd be like, yeah. And this happened at like Starbucks because they always ask you your name. It happened at drive-thrus. And it became a running joke between me and my friends because, like, oh, don't let Dave order. We're gonna be in line forever.
Oh my gosh.
But I think once I got more open about it, and once I was able to even make fun of myself, and again, I told myself I wasn't gonna tell this story, but I have to because it's so funny. When I became a crisis counselor, where you're basically on call, you're on like a phone line,
Yeah.
and you talk to people who are in the worst moments of their life. When I first went for that job, my wife, who, and I know this story kind of paints her in a bad life, but she's a wonderful person. She's an amazing individual. But she said, "Are you sure that you could do that? Because if someone calls up and it's like, hey, I'm going to shoot myself unless you can unless you can talk me down," and I'm going, don't do it. Like where you get stuck, it can be a real problem. And it was something that I wrestled with back and forth for years. Like, am I able to, can be doing this? And what it comes down to is just understanding what it is you have. And when I realized that my stutter was impacted by my anxiety, then you can find ways around it. Mm-hmm. Then you can be like, okay, if I calm myself down, if I get myself into a space where I can, manage my anxiety, then I can talk smoothly and everything like that. And so I think, that old saying of knowledge is power is so true, because the more we understand something, and that could be anything, that could be mental illness, that could be racism, the more you understand something, the less you are afraid of it, the less you're held by it, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, for sure. So did you ever get one of those kind of calls?
I did, and I handled it very well. I was able to talk that individual down. I didn't stutter because I had learned through that kind of experience of, if I'm focusing on, oh God, I'm going to stutter, I'm going to stutter.
Yeah.
Whereas if I can focus on what they're saying, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about, in that moment, okay, what does that individual need? So in actual fact, when I'm focused on something like that, I don't have many times where I'm blocking on words, because I'm so focused on this is what's happening, and like here's what I need to focus on, and how am I doing, and how am I getting, this individual help and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's when I slow down and go, hey, I didn't stutter. Then you go, oh crap, now look, I'm stuttering, right?
It's so interesting when you bring
it's
attention to it.
Yeah.
How it impacts you.
Yeah.
And it makes sense why you avoided it or you didn't talk about it, because for all those years you're told to not bring it up, so that when you do, then it's like, oh my God, I'm not, like I'm not supposed to talk about this or bring it up.
And it makes it worse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
When in all actuality, you're saying actually the opposite.
Yeah.
However, it makes sense why that would happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some ways that you would redefine your disability, or like now as an adult, if you could go back and talk to little David, what would you explain to him, or how would you fill those gaps?
Tell him
for
to run. Just run.
Run
just
for the
run
hills.
away. No.
And pick a different hockey team.
No. I would honestly say, like, it so oftentimes the thing that we're most afraid of, people calling us out for, people kind of being, being like an outcast for.
Yeah.
It's not really that thing. Like I find so often when we worry about something, when we kind of make it larger than it actually is, that's when it kind of grabs hold of us. And I would honestly say that just being who you are, because I missed out on so many things where I wouldn't talk, or I wouldn't tell a joke because I'd be afraid that I would be stuck on the punchline and I couldn't say it. And I find that really held me back in a lot of things, right? Where people didn't really get to see that charismatic attitude that you were talking about earlier, right? Where it's, if people are to see that and acknowledge that, yeah, this is who I am, and I have this as well, it's not a bad thing, because you're showing them who you are.
Yeah.
And being who you are it's all that we can do, because we can hide behind, I'm going to hide these from people, but eventually it's going to come out. And that's what I learned through a lot of things.
I hear you talking about self-acceptance.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah. And how does self-acceptance play a role in managing day to day for you?
I think it's just like, oftentimes I would be very focused on, okay, I have to be in this kind of a box that we were talking about earlier, right? Around, okay, I can't do these things. And I think when we step out of that box, when we are able to accept ourselves for who we are, it can bring around that acceptance. It can bring around that, hey, I don't need to hide. I don't need to be someone who I'm not, right? And if people don't accept me for who I am, or if people say things like, oh, well, how come you're talking in a weird way, right? It's okay. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is that from my own kind of the childhood, and I'm not here to bash my parents or anything like that. No, but I think back in those days, because as you said, I'm quite old. I'm old. No, but I find back in those days, we weren't having these kind of conversations. Yeah. We weren't talking openly about things. Whereas I think nowadays, like in our house, we talk very openly about what things we're struggling with. But I think when you do that, there is a chance that you might go too far and say, well, that's why I can't do this. And it's like, no, you don't limit yourself. You have this, but in spite of that, you're still going to be doing these things. Your
journey might just look a little bit different, but if we're attuned to people around us, all of our journeys are different.
Absolutely.
So what you're going through versus someone else versus the other person, your neighbors, it's all relative, I guess, in that sense. So when we compare, I think that's where we set ourselves up of, well, this person has it so perfect, or I would imagine like school when you have to read out loud, like that was hard for me, and only because I didn't speak English well, and I was born and raised here, but I just I would say I born and raised in Canada but grew up in India. My household was all first immigrants, right? So you're learning I'm learning Punjabi more than I'm learning English. My sister and I laugh. We'd always get put in the ESL classes. And then like half a year later, they're like, oh, wait, you actually shouldn't be in this class. And we're like, yeah.
They're like, where are you from? It's like, I'm from Canada.
I also wanted to, when I was putting some questions together for you, I wanted to ask you a bit about toxic masculinity. We've done a couple of episodes with some men on and getting their perspectives. Each of them have a very different experience about what it means to be a man. And I think about you, and I was sort of brainstorming, thinking you're growing up, A, a white man, and B, you're growing up with this disability, possibly as people around you might have be looking at it as a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're supposed to grow up in this box of being a man in a certain way, hardcore man, whatever definition in your household was, I'm not sure. So I'm curious about, did you brush up against that toxic masculinity piece? Like, did you feel like I don't even fit in there? Because like, were you getting made fun of as a kid? Were people like, I'm curious about what childhood for a boy that would have been going through what you were like, and how that got to, how your definition of what to be a man got to.
Absolutely. Being. Well, let me just lay down here like on this couch and I'll tell really like all started back, but like honestly, it was because back in that time, you were characterized as a man if you could, like you would learn to fight. So like I got put into martial arts and like hockey, and you have to be tough. And if people make fun of you, you don't show any vulnerability. You don't show any of that stuff because men, and it was never said outright like in my house, but it was more so like inferred that, hey, you don't cry. We don't talk about these big things. We don't talk about any of our past trauma. We definitely do not talk about any of our issues around mental health issues or like addictions. We don't share that stuff because that we don't want to be vulnerable.
Right.
And I find especially when you go through that and you're kind of brought up like that, even in the first few years that I was with my wife, it was very much like, you don't share, like you don't talk about things. And I had to really do some exploring and be like, yeah, I don't talk about things because we don't talk about those things.
Yeah.
We don't talk about
speech impediment. Bruno.
We don't talk about Bruno. We keep things quiet because you don't let anyone in. And I think one of the hardest things is being able to actually go and say, yeah, I need help. One of the things I struggled with for years is anger.
Yeah.
And just, I was, again, not told, not taught, but when you get angry, you puff out your chest and you get angry and you hit things, and because that's how a man shows he's angry. And when I learned that being angry is able to say, yeah, I'm angry right now. This is unfair. This is an injustice.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to voice it that way and not do the whole macho thing, it takes a lot. It took a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy, because when you're raised like that, when that's what you see from all of your kind of higher ups, all of your kind of grown ups, your dad, your uncle, everyone is doing that.
Yeah.
You assume, okay, well, that's how I have to be. And then when you go down another path, it's very, very challenging because you're almost going against your past.
Yeah.
You're going against, well, this is not what a man is now. And I think that toxic masculinity is such a huge issue now, because so many men, and I know that women have it too. Not that I am a woman, but I know that women have it too with magazines and all like that. But men have it as well, where they look at, I have to be in shape. I have to work out. I have to show that I have huge kind of.
You have to be Thor,
muscles.
man.
Yeah.
How do you keep up with Thor?
As much as my wife would love it if I started looking like Thor or like Ryan Reynolds, I'm sure my wife would have no problem with that whatsoever. But I think it's also being that self-acceptance and saying, hey, that's not who I am. I would love it if I could become that way. If I could work out more, if I could put more time into taking care of myself, not only for that appearance, but also for health reasons now that I'm getting older and things like that. But I think it's also being okay with who you are and not trying to be this higher standard of what a man is. What I've tried to instill in our family and to bring around is, being a positive influence around or like in your world. So making someone's kind of day, making sure that you can not call another individual down by being insulting, because in schools that stuff happens. A lot of young people are teased and made fun of, and it's just learning to not go into that level and not have to be this macho kind of individual.
Do you feel as a man today things are shifting and changing against that need to be toxic and men don't cry and that harshness for men?
Yes, but I also think that with every kind of change, you always have the people, like, I mean, with any kind of change, you always have the people who they feel it's changing, so they have to swing back the other way.
Yeah, the resistance, right?
Because you have so many people that are like, oh no, this is how we used to be doing things, like in the past. And I am kind of, I have that same thing, not like around toxic masculinity, but around other things where you get caught in the, well, that's how we've always done it.
Right.
But understanding that as part of growing, as part of it, like adapting, things change.
Yeah.
And so I always try to instill the fact of, hey, no one can tell you what you want to be. No one can tell you, well, this is what, even in our roles, oftentimes we get kind of labeled with this, well, if you're a therapist, that means you must just, we have to sit in an office all day and talk. Well, no, like if you want, we can go for a walk. We can, one of the biggest things now is after the pandemic, so many people are like, well, therapy has to be done, it has to be done in an office and face to face. And we have to talk about these things and like anything like that. And then over the pandemic, it was, well, no, we can do this online.
Right.
We can do this through Zoom. We can do this over the phone. And so many purists, I guess, are like, no, we can't do that. And it's like, well, how come? How come we never thought about things outside the box?
Yeah, it's like changing with the times. And I think that's a really good example because the pandemic helped us question that quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And in some instances, we had no choice but to do something completely different.
Yeah.
Just because that old option of this is how we always had done it wasn't even available anymore. So you had to adapt quickly.
Absolutely.
I think when it's one of those all or nothings, we do adapt because we have no choice, we feel. But when there are choices before us, it's hard to say, well, I'm going to make my own decision to go down this route, which is redefining what it means to be a man versus this old way that I've been taught. And, I don't know if you've ever heard of this TV show called Loudermilk.
No.
It's got, I don't know, he's the man that was in Office Space, the actor that we all grew to love.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a really cool show where he's an addict and he's in recovery and he runs these men's sober sort of groups. And a lot of the men in the groups are perfectly cast and many generations before us. So it's interesting that they're even in this group because drinking wouldn't be an addiction for many of them. And so they all, for some reason, part of these groups, and it's very interesting conversations. So one of the characters is trying to rebuild this relationship with this daughter, and she's telling him about how she had to turn down a job because her friend got offered $15,000 more than she did, and it comes down to the fact because she's a woman and he's a man. And the dad is having a really hard time understanding this because, he's like, well, you have to take that as you're lucky. You got offered the job, but also your boss probably isn't going to harass you. So you kind of got $15,000 sort of taken off, but also you're not going to have to go through what women go through with harassment and stuff. So the daughter is like, whoa, I can't believe you're talking to me like this. Yeah. This is not the world we live in, Dad. No. I should be equal. So she leaves and he kind of has this aha moment. But at the same time, he has been court ordered to take a woman sensitivity course because he got into a fight with a woman on the golf course.
Yeah.
And so, there's all this resistance. And then after this conversation with his daughter, he shows up and he's just like, I cannot believe that my daughter tells me that this is the way the world is, that women get paid significantly lower than men. And so one of the men in there is like, yeah, but that's not our problem. That's their problem, right? And tell your daughter to stop worrying about that stuff. It is what it is. And his response is so perfect. And he's saying, the problem isn't my daughter and the women and these issues. The problem is us.
Yeah.
It's not about my daughter. He's like, this has nothing to do, us sitting in this women's sensitivity course actually has nothing to do with women.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with what kind of outlook do we want to walk out with? How do we want to make a change? And because we've always known the world in one way, all of these women's sensitivity courses and workshops have been created because of the way the world was. And it's our job now to move forward with it. And he just like, I'm crying as I'm watching this because I'm like, good for this character to have this like moment because he hit the nail on the head with, we get so caught up about the environment and what's around us and try to adapt. And we've sort of shared a few examples, including the MFU and some of your stories too, that it's less about everyone else, but how am I going to, I can only be in charge of myself. So what can I do to make a change? Your what you were just saying sort of reminded me a bit of, that character of having that aha moment.
And I think that absolutely kind of it ties in to our world nowadays, because oftentimes whenever we're faced with anything like this, like mental health or racism or like any kind of thing like that, everyone kind of excuses it away with, that's just how the world is. But it's our kind of responsibility that we look at ourselves and say, okay, so what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing to either influence that or to change that, right? Because that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Is with ourselves being able to challenge it and say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to fall in that box. I'm not going to, make those comments that, that's how it is. Well, why? Why are we not challenging that?
Yeah. And are we okay with it being that way? Like, how's it serving us? I know is like famous therapist question you guys all like to ask. How's that serving you?
Yeah. Well, that's more of a Dr. Phil kind of thing. It's like, how is that working for you? And it's like, okay.
Dr. Phil.
But I mean, that's where like it starts is, okay, I'm really feeling bad about whatever. Okay, well, how's that working? What am I doing to perpetuate that problem?
Yeah.
And I think we have to look at ourselves. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is to look at ourselves and say, oh yeah, I'm actually part of the problem.
Yeah.
Where like especially as we talked about here, like I'm in a role as a male or like as a white male therapist where that's a role where some people might say, well, that's more of something that a girl would do or anything like that. It's like, well, no, that's just who I am. That's what I feel called for, and that's what I want to do, and not being hung up on those things and be like, well, why is that? Like, why like are we seeing things?
Why is it that women are the ones that talk? I think it's interesting because you are right, and that those people saying that, one thing they're accurate about, there aren't many males in our field, and you guys are like unicorns. As I said, you're my first male therapist to have on, and after you, I don't really know very many more because there's only so many out there, I find. But I think that also ties into that question of toxic masculinity, because I would imagine, you have to face that, where you maybe have certain male clients that walk in the door with a very particular role playing of that toxic character that he grew up with. That's that you're taught, don't cry. And now he's breaking down before you. I'm sure you've had those sorts of experienes too.
No. I'm really bad at my job, Kira. No. But I think
I'm making you feel so. You're like, what? Wait. Well, I'm supposed to help clients get to what?
That's what's supposed to happen in therapy? Oh, I've been doing it wrong for the last 20 years here. Jeez. Like,
you're such a liar. You're so funny at making yourself look like you're not even skilled when you're so far from it.
That actually happened the other day. I was talking with a colleague who kind of wasn't aware of all of my kind of things. And then someone had said something, and they looked at me like, wow, like you have a lot of letters behind your name. I was like, yeah. And I'm like, so you're really smart. Like you hide that well. I go, yeah, I do, because it's just, because I think we want to go up against that norm that, men can't cry, and men, we shouldn't go to therapy. We just go to the bar and have a few drinks.
That's
and that's
right. Batting cages.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the first things I try and do, especially when I have a client like that, is I start talking and say, look, like, I'm not going to force you to cry. I'm not going to, let's go into your childhood and really dig up all that stuff. It's a space where oftentimes I try and say, we only want to make this as helpful as you want it to be. Yeah. So like, if you want to be in here and you want to share stuff, absolutely. And I think, again, when you can bring down that toxic masculinity of, I have to be this tough guy, oftentimes there are guys who want to talk about that and say, this sucks. Like, I feel like I have so much pressure where I have to be this, this normal guy where, if my family has a crisis, I have to take care of it.
Yeah.
And being able to challenge that and say, well, how come? How come you can't share this with your kind of a partner or like with your friends?
Mm-hmm.
And when they get challenged on that, oftentimes they get this kind of aha moment of, yeah, why am I not sharing that? Like, I can easily walk in here and talk with you about it, and it's fine. Like, there's no problems that happen, but I can't talk with my friends about that. Well, how come? Well, we've just never done that. Okay, well, why? Why is that your norm? And oftentimes what I hear is that when they challenge that and they start opening up, they hear from their friends like, I'm so happy we did this, because we start to open up those things, right?
Yeah.
Because yes, there are kind of differences between male and female, but at the end of the day, we're all human.
Yeah.
We all have this need of, we all carry this weight of anxiety or stress and that stuff that needs to be identified and talked about.
Totally. Especially when the suicide rates are significantly higher in men than women. And I think women, it's not that women wouldn't report that they didn't think about doing it. I think women also, there's lots of reports and stats that are more likely to talk about it before that happens.
Yeah.
Where for men, it's rare. And so the numbers are high. And that's only reported, I always say, because not all suicides are reported.
No, absolutely.
And eventually it can get to a place for a lot of men where that seems to be the option of, well, I'm in so much pain. I can only hide it for so much longer that's my end option. And I think I've talked to a few men that have come on, and for me, raising 2 boys as well in my household, like men's health is so important because even from my community, if we can focus on men's well-being, I think the numbers in addictions and domestic violence and can go down as well, because they're all correlated. They're connected to that. So I think having your presence in the mental health world is really needed, and it's really appreciated, so that you can be a good-ish role model.
Yeah. Once you really get to know me, then it's like, oh, maybe this isn't the best role model.
No, I'm kidding. I just had to throw that out there, So,
but I like
go for it. Yeah.
But just like one thing that you were saying there around those suicide rates and around these things is that, like, oftentimes the biggest predictor of suicide is hopelessness. And whenever people feel hopeless, they tend to feel isolated and like alone. And that's why we see that so often with a lot of men, because they don't want to share. They feel like it's going against that, a man can handle these things on his own and never ask for help. And I can honestly say that I've been called that too with a few of my therapy, like early on when I first became a therapist. So many of my colleagues would say, hey, you need to start asking for help. And no, I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you are isolating yourself. And then when you have that feeling of hopelessness, you feel like you can't kind of talk with anybody.
Yeah.
And then that makes you feel more alone and more hopeless. And then you feel like the only way out is to end your life. And it happens so often. And I think that if we are just able to have these conversations and open up and say, yeah, I'm flawed, I can't do this on my own. I think that would make such a powerful impact on those numbers that you were talking about.
So what would, if for those men that are listening, or even for people listening that would like to send a message to some of the men in their life, what's a question or something that you would put out there to get people to think about in terms of breaking that barrier and challenging themselves and wanting to say something, talk? How can we get people to do that?
I think what I've often said is that, like, men often, we strive to be men of courage, or we want to have that toxic masculinity of, we are the men that run into battle, and we're going to approach it head on. And I would often say, that's still okay. But being able that you can approach things like mental health, like anxiety, anything, but approach it head on and say, yeah, I have a problem. I need to run in here and I need to kick my mental health's ass. Being able that you can use that toxic masculinity as a way of saying, I need to fight against this, because so often men think, oh, well, being able to fight means, well, if someone calls me a name, I need to stand up in a bar. you know how badly you would throw someone off if they were making fun of you in a bar and you're like, hey man, that really hurt me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would have a guy be, okay, like they wouldn't know how to, like,
Yeah.
because when you call it out, like when you throw something at someone that they're not expecting, that's when a lot of that change happens. Because then there's that old movie, Analyze This, with where he's like
Jack
a mob
Nicholson
boss
or something.
No,
Robert De Niro.
Yeah,
Maybe,
thank you.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and he's talking about, like, he's trying to call up this other mob boss, and they usually just like swear at each other, and he's like, I'm feeling really sad about this, and I want to talk with you so I can have some closure. And the other mob boss says, we need to find out what this closure thing is, because if he's going to hit us with this, we need to know what. Like, you throw people off, and I think that's what the approach is.
Yeah.
Is being able to say, hey, I can be vulnerable. I can say, hey, I don't like this.
Right.
I'm feeling hopeless right now because I feel like I gotta carry the weight of the family.
That's right.
So many men feel that way.
Yes.
And if you could just call it out, I mean, yeah, it might not change, but being able to call it out, and I kind of equate it to, you know, that I forget what the statue is, but it's that guy holding up the whole kind of world.
Mm-hmm.
And when you open up about something, you're sharing that weight with another person, and it gets less heavy, even though, like, nothing might change about it. When you share these emotions, it just, you can kind of share that weight and be like, okay, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I'm carrying the weight of my family. I am the sole kind of breadwinner. I'm working like 4 jobs. Okay, well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I can't make it better. I can't throw money at it or anything like that, but we can at least talk about it so that you feel like, hey, I'm doing the best that I can. And I think that is a mantra that I share with a lot of men, because a lot of men, because of toxic masculinity or whatever, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think being able to have that mantra of, I'm doing the best that I can.
Yeah.
That is the thing that can help so many people. And again, I'm only talking about men, but I mean, all people.
Yeah.
Being able that you can say, I'm doing the best that I can.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's all that we can do.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think you probably named your episode.
It was due. I mean, like even a blind squirrel finds a nut. So just,
yeah, I mean, you at some point.
After 20 years, I get something right.
And it's recorded. So that's
so we're just going to play that back, and we'll just have it on my resume.
At your annual evaluation, you can take this episode and play the highlights.
There you go. Just So this is my kind of eval here.
That's right. Yeah. I'll send you the stats afterwards and let you know how many people listen to it.
So only 2 people. And you said you listened to it twice, right? Yeah. Oh, okay. So like it was you who listened to it. Yeah.
I hardly believe that, but I think you said that so well, that I'm doing the best I can, and I think.
And I didn't have a speech impediment on it either.
I know you did. You brought it home. You did well. Sometimes we're searching for these meaningful conversations or ways to connect, and even just that phrase of I'm doing the best I can, I think can give someone room to breathe. And like you said, it's not about fixing these things. No. It's just, can I have a space and a moment to breathe so I can take on the things, because we have to work, we have to feed ourselves and our kids, we have to pay the bills. There's things that we can't take off the plate. Those things have to happen. Yeah. However, if we can take off those stressors and even just try to make sense of them, and like you said, when you have a couple more brains at it, a couple different minds at it, we can come at it different angles. And the domino effect was really well said too, of you say something different, it does cause a ripple effect. And I bet you probably do that with families and or even in couples or with anyone in therapy too, around you're going at this the same way over and over. The movie's going to end with the same way. But if you choose your own adventure, do something different, maybe the ripple effect will allow you to have a different response back from that person.
I should write that down, because that would be really effective. So see, I mean, like even though we still like we don't work together anymore, you're still taking me to school here.
Yeah.
Just,
right. There you go. Well,
this is part of my therapy kind of school.
Yeah. Can't wait for the book tour, chapter 2.
Do whatever Kieran says.
What would Kieran do? Can you imagine? So going back to self-acceptance as well, because a lot of what you're talking about with understanding what it is to be a man, as well as working with your own stutter and your disabilities and working with it, then working against it. I think, as you had mentioned, a lot of it comes down to the self-acceptance. So like, how do I love myself? How to take care of myself? How do I accept myself? And even when I hate myself, still have respect for myself so I can work through these things. So my question to you about self-acceptance is, what advice would you give to someone that's listening today, or maybe some strategies to people listening today that maybe are currently struggling with accepting themselves? Where would you guide them and help them to sort of think?
I think that's, first of all, that's a great kind of question there, Kieran. So
thank you.
I honestly, I previously have thought that self-acceptance was being like, oh, okay, well, that's just who I am and whatever. But I think there was a saying once, whereas the minute we stop learning and growing is the moment we begin to rot. And I honestly, I try to bring that into both my professional life and my personal life, because I feel that so often we don't want to accept things the way that they are, right? Like, so I could easily say, oh, I have a speech impediment, so I can't work, so I'm going to go and say that I can't work because of this. And I'm not saying anything bad about that, but I could have kind of done that and said, oh, I can't work, I can't talk well, so I can't do what I want to do. And that could be me accepting my life. But I think where I often challenge people, or where I often say, like, whatever you want to be, but you have to put effort in, and that is often the scariest part. Is being able to say, no, I want to be better, right? So there are still things where I am working on. I'm still working on my time management skills. As you know, when I showed up late here, right? It's like, I am still working on those things. I'm still trying to work on things to make myself not a better human being, but a human being that I want to see, right? And the way that I get there is I talk with others, right? Like, I talk to people and say, so what are you seeing? My wife has a whole list of things where I could be better. But I think
let's call her. Let's get her on.
Oh, she would love to. She was like, I'm going to listen to this podcast, and I'm going to be like, oh my God, you're so full of shit. Sorry, you can just bleep that out. It can be so easy just to be like, okay, well, I'm happy with where I am, but I always want to constantly kind of challenge myself, kind of bring myself to a point where I can keep growing. And I often try and challenge other people around that too, and say, okay, so what more would you like to achieve? What more would you like to work on, right? So many people I know who are like, yeah, I'm getting better at managing my time, or I'm getting better at managing, like, my own stress level. Okay, well, where else would we want to go? Like, are there other areas where you want to work on? Because I feel that the more that we push ourselves to grow and to kind of improve, the better that we become, and the, like, example that we set for our younger generation, our younger individuals. But I also think that, being able to like accept where you are, but also accept the fact that I can still grow at things. Like, I can still be better. I can still try and set a positive example. I think that is that is the only advice that I would offer. In that sense, because I think that, again, it goes back to, that is the best that you can do, right? Change won't happen instantly. It's something that takes time, and we have to work on, and it's not getting down or hung up on, oh, well, I really want to challenge myself, and I wanted to be the best kind of counselor, or like a therapist that there was. Okay, well, first of all, there's no such thing as the best kind of therapist, because I'm sure even the ones that are world renowned would say that they're still working on things. That they're still learning things.
Right.
So trying to be doing things as best as you can, and keep learning and keep growing. I guess, that's the long answer.
No, I like the answer. I think that's well said. And I can hear you utilize a lot of your own personal, I think, learnings and lessons in life when you talk about self-acceptance of, okay, it's not about just being better. And I think a lot of my previous years were spent about thinking I'd be a good human if I'm better. And I'm better at whatever the list is in the moment. And I think then, you get anxious and you think, well, I can't ever, I set really high expectations. I got to lower expectations, they would say on SNL.
For sure.
And so, okay, we're talking a little bit about self-acceptance as well as your role as a therapist. So I want to know, what drives you in that room? What motivates you? What brings you back every day to want to keep being a therapist?
It's really a combination of, wanting, well, everybody who gets into the mental health kind of a field, they always want to help other people, right? Like our goal is, well, we see that there's problems and we want to help other people. With my goal is to, well, help people, but also to figure out what it is that is going on.
Right.
And so oftentimes, and again, like I always think of the show House, where I don't know if you've ever watched that show,
yes.
But it's like
only the first 3 seasons, and it felt very repetitive.
It's the same thing over again.
Yeah.
No, but he likes the puzzle. He likes the thing. In a way, I like that too. I like to be able to talk with someone, but I'm not the one who has to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Like it's when I work with someone, or when I work with a family, or like a couple or whoever, I often want to help them on that kind of a path and be like, okay. And when they realize things, that's awesome for me, because I'm like, okay, I helped you kind of get there. I helped you recognize these own things, right?
Yeah.
So I will sometimes feel like a guide rather than here's what you're doing wrong. If you just take 2 of these, it'll be done.
Right.
No, because that's not going to help somebody. Like if they can learn how to find these things on their own, that is a great feeling, where you can feel like, basically, I've worked myself out of a job.
Yeah.
Yay, right? The thing that keeps me going is just that kind of need, that kind of, hey, I get to help people, especially in my kind of everyday role, where I'm dealing with youth who have very intense kind of trauma, very awful things that they have experienced, and to help them work through that, to help them live through that, and to kind of process that and help them recognize that doesn't have to identify them, is a huge thing when they can make those leaps. Again, really wrong thing to say there when working with kids who are at risk and they make the leaps.
Oh, I didn't even catch it. You know what? That's a funny thing, though, in terms of working in mental health, and probably I would imagine people working in the hospital world would say too, like, you have to have a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
Because it can be very tiring, stressful, all the things that I'm sure you're thinking of when you do a job like the job that you do.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a sense of humor, if you can't make light of a risky day that you had to help and somebody lived another day, I would imagine it would be such a difficult job to do.
One of the things I talk to a lot of the staff team that we kind of work with is I kind of phrase it as, sometimes you feel bad about making those inappropriate kind of comments or jokes, but you have to understand that we are working with young people and their families on the worst kind of day of their life.
Yeah.
And when a young person tries to hurt themselves or has to go to hospital, their family comes and everyone's in that room and their whole life is turned upside down.
Yeah.
And our job is we have to help them, we have to get them someplace safe, and then we have to go back in to work.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with like another one. And so that's why we make those jokes, is to help us to process through all that stuff. Because it is a very challenging kind of job.
Yeah.
And so being able that you can find a way to cope around that, and knowing yourself and knowing, hey, okay, when am I able where I can handle? When am I able where I can, or like we were talking about, having that self-awareness of saying, hey, I'm not okay right now. I need to take some time. I need to talk with a therapist. I need to work through that, because when you are aware of that, that's when you can help as many people as you can. Because what I would hate to see, and what I have seen, is these very skilled like individuals who have a heart for it, they go and they help people and they just wear themselves out, and then they don't have anything left for themselves. And so
how do you fuel your bucket, or refuel it, or fill it?
You have to have someone in your life that is your rock, that is someone that is there to give you what you need. And I'm not saying, like, in my job, I come home, I have an inflated ego, and sometimes my wife has to just let the air out of that a little bit, right? Yeah. Like, oh, guess what? I saved all these people at work. It's great. Yes, but you didn't take out the trash.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So can we start there?
Right. But and again, I know that I'm like making fun of no, but having someone, my wife, I can honestly say that I would not be able to do half the stuff that I have done in my life without her, because she is my constant. She is always there. She is the one that when I've had a horrible day, I come home and she's the one who's there. And even after taking care of everything that she takes care of, our kids and everything like that, she's the one who's there and is like, yeah, I still have you. I can help you through this. And so as nice as my resume looks, it really is a lot of credit to her, because she has done a lot of that stuff to help me. So
yeah, I think that's good. Kudos, give credit where credit's due, because it's lovely to hear that you belong to a team outside of work.
Absolutely.
And it takes that team to do the work that you're doing. It's not just you showing up alone, but it's because you had a de-stressful night or a glorious morning, whatever you want to call it. Everything kind of work through, or if it didn't, you were able to say, can you hold on to this stressful thing for a minute, so that you could go and do your job. And I think for those of us that may not have that, that's difficult.
But I also think that it doesn't have to be a partner. Like it can be a friend.
Yeah.
It can be something that you do. Like, I mean, so many of my friends, they have their own outlet. They go and they have a hobby that they kind of take up, something that can ground you away from your identity of like helping people or like things like that. Like, I know that oftentimes we often think, oh, well, we are always a therapist whenever we do. No, there are times when you can have that aside and say, no, I'm going to be this guy who goes out and plays hockey, or you want to be able to have something else outside of that, because that is your time where you can recharge. And it's important that you know what it is that you use to recharge. Like me, I am, as people have called me, a flaming extrovert. I love being around people. Right? No, what? Where is this coming from? I love being around people. Yeah. That is my self-care. I love talking. I love sharing with people, which is funny because
I know, right? Look how far you've come.
I know.
Like, that's amazing.
But for other people, they would much rather be at home. They'd much rather be reading a book. They'd much rather be isolated. There's nothing wrong with either of those things, but knowing that that's how you self-care is key. That it's that self-awareness piece, right? Where you're so, okay, this is what I need. And making sure you have opportunities where you can take that. Yeah,
no, totally. I agree. I think we, as being part of a family, I would say there's got to be individual time. There's got to be couple time. Then there's got to be family time. And in there, you also have work and all those things too that you have to be able to put towards. But if there isn't this time to reflect by myself or have that time with my husband or us individually with our kids or together as a family, I think everything gets lumped into this one big pot. Yeah. And it becomes more and more, so I found when I was working, it started to become more and more difficult to find my way back because the stressors were just coming along and then going along. So it was kind of like this little circle. I'm bringing stuff from home, taking stuff back, and there wasn't a place that I was putting it. And like you, I also owed my husband a lot of appreciation because of him. I also felt like I could do my job and had a primary caregiver outside of my brother to take care of the kids, because the kind of work that you're doing isn't just a 9-to-5 sort of mentality. Not to say 9 to 5 isn't stressful, but when you don't know when you're going to go home sometimes, probably a reason why you were late. I think you came from work, right? So how do how do you put a timer on a conversation with a human, or how do you put a timer on a crisis that you're trying to de-escalate, right?
I know that you're at risk right now,
Yeah.
but I got a 5:30 I gotta get
to this podcast interview. So can you just save the rest for the other shift?
Yeah, let's just wrap it up, okay?
Yeah.
No, but I think it's also a fact of leaving that stuff there, right? And I often make a point of saying, like, because there's always stuff that happens at home and there's always stuff that happens at work, and we have to be able to leave that in a place where we can grab it again, right? So whenever I come into work, I make sure I can leave all that stuff from home at home, and that's tough. I mean, it is tough. That's 20 years of trying to learn how to be doing that, and it still kind of leaks in.
Yeah.
And it's just being aware of it, being mindful of it, being like, hey, I have to, make the kind of the necessary understandings about this, right?
Yeah. But when you talk a lot about self-responsibility, and I think that goes hand in hand too, that I hear you talking about, I'm responsible for these things in my life. I'm responsible up to a point at work. I'm also responsible for how I communicate. Like, a lot of your undertones and what you're saying is about, this personal sense of responsibility. And I think when you can own that and have that, it goes along the lines of what you were saying earlier about owning the stutter as well and being in charge of it. So you're not working against it, you're working with it again. And when you are able to be in charge of, it's going to be a stressful day, it was a stressful day, or I'll get back to that later, it feels to me, or I hear a lot of this, like, we used to say this when I used to work with you, that whole piece about being intentionally purposeful. Mm-hmm. When you're aware and present in moments, when you're going to walk out, how that's going to impact you, or how much of that conversation you're going to take with you. Like, I'm sure when you're done recording, you're going to forget about everything you said because you're like, this was whatever.
I already have. So it's,
what are we talking about?
When you went back there and said, so when you said this, I was like, I said that? That sounds so really smart. Jeez, like, who is this guy at the front end of the podcast?
Yeah,
was really smart.
That was great. That's excellent.
This guy now is just, he's here being like, hey, so what's this over here? Let's play with these things. Yeah.
So how can families and friends and society, I guess, at large, provide support and create an inclusive environment for individuals that want to be part of therapy, but maybe those people around them aren't interested in it? So what are some ways that folks that are listening that are like, I love that for you, but not for me.
This is great, but
How can we start to challenge that stigma more, I guess?
I think it's more of so many people, they think of therapy like, oh, I have to go in there, I have to lay on a couch, and I have to talk about all the stuff from my childhood. I don't know what other kind of therapists are doing, but in terms of the therapists that I've gone to for my own stuff and how I approach therapy, we don't do any, or at least that's not how I see it. It's more of a conversation. It's more of a, let's talk. Like, let's just, like, oftentimes that's the first question I ask. Like, I mean, I go through the whole, we have to talk about, like, confidentiality and everything like that,
all the therapy school,
all the therapy stuff,
right?
And then I'll usually lead with, hey, so, or like I'll usually start off with, hey, I'm David. You'll notice these few things about me, and then we go through the whole rigmarole of everything like that, and then it's more of a, okay, so what kind of brought you here, or what would be helpful for us to talk about? Because I never want, like, you cannot, like, you cannot do forced therapy. You cannot bring someone in and be like, you have to talk. Yeah. And you would be surprised how often I get that, where, like, a parent will bring their young child in and be like, they have to talk. Yeah. And it's like, well, I'm not going to get them to talk. But what you can do is you can make an environment. You can set a stage where you can say, hey, let's just talk about things, because more often than not, it's going to be coming out. Whenever we're in conversation, it's going to be coming out, because if these people want to talk about things, they're going to bring them up.
And if it's almost like going back to your own childhood too, of if folks would bring it up or allow that space, you probably would have had a different path and being able to talk about the things that you weren't supposed to talk about.
For sure, right? Well, and again, it's that everyone's so afraid of I don't want to tell people that I'm in therapy. Well, who is going to know? right? Like unless you tell them,
Yeah.
your therapist under huge like ethical things is not going to ever break that. So no one is going to know. And so many people are like, oh, well, I don't want to go because what if people see me walk in there? It's like, okay, well, there's a number of options online that you could do now. There are so many ways to access this, and it's so helpful for so many people.
Why do you think the stigma still exists today when there's all this research, all this work put forth in how managing our well-being should be a top priority, and for some people post-pandemic I think it's getting there.
Yeah.
However, I've found myself in quite a few conversations in the last while where the stigma is so strong, it's beating us right in the conversation because we don't want to talk about something. What do you think is the biggest force behind that stigma still?
I think it's, well, like I think there are a number of things. I think people don't want to admit that they can't be doing it. There's that worry that I can't manage these things. Like it's that I don't want to seem helpless, right? There's that also the old school kind of mentality of, oh, you are seeing a therapist? Well, that means you must be crazy. And so when people say, yeah, I'm going to a therapist, or my wife and I are going to a couple's kind of a therapist, the immediate thought is, oh my God, are you guys in trouble? Like, oh, like you just like, there's so much of a negative kind of connotation to, you have to get help. Oh, well, why? Whereas I think people, if they were to view therapy as a kind of maintenance on your car, right?
Yeah.
Like we all have to do maintenance on our cars so they keep kind of running.
Yeah.
If we could see therapy that way, that, hey, I'm just doing this so I can make sure I'm still living my best life.
Yeah.
That is how you want to view any kind of a, like, or even viewing it when you go for like a massage or for like a chiropractor, right? Like it's something that's going to help me. Yeah, I could live without it, but why would I not try and be my best kind of self? And I think that's one of the things that holds a lot of people back.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, everyone says, oh, well, I mean, there's cost because it's so expensive. And yeah, I mean, like it is. And there are low cost options. I mean, one of my goals, and I get a lot of flack for this, and I'm going to say it on your podcast, so look out.
No, controversy.
You are going to get, but I think that because we live in a country where we cover healthcare, why are we not covering mental health care?
Yeah.
And I know that would lead to, well, therapists all have to agree on a rate, and and that's a huge kind of issue too. But I think because I think if people were to recognize that their mental health is just as, if not more important than their physical health, when we would start getting that understanding, then we would break down that stigma. Then we would break down those barriers. Because I think so many people who would benefit from kind of counseling or a therapy, they don't do it because they throw up these own barriers.
Yeah.
Well, it's so much money.
Yeah.
Well, okay, if we took away that barrier, how many more people would access it? How many more people would kind of recognize how important it is for their own lives?
That's very well said. Like we have annual physical checkups that we're encouraged. In some jobs, you have to do them every 3 months or 6 months because of the type of job you have. And I feel the Europeans do it so well. They have mental health care is part of their coverage in so many countries in Europe, where they're seeing stats that are showing people actually working better and doing better at their job too. So to have that as part of your benefits, as part of your health care would I think as well be a great place to help the rest of us see that, oh, okay, that's why we're still stuck in the stigma piece, because we're not prioritizing it. Absolutely. You go to the emergency room and you're waiting several hours because the person with a broken bone gets to go in first because it hurts more.
Yeah.
However, somebody who's sitting at the hospital that's trying to kill themselves is also hurting. Yeah. And when we are trying to compare, I mean, I get life-threatening, I have a frequent peanut allergy flyer. Like, I get it. If you're having a heart attack, if you're having something, like, what's urgent, right? Yeah. However, when you're sitting there waiting several hours to get seen or several months before a referral picks you up, so then you're right. Then why would people think that it's a priority when it's not really we're not treating it that way in society.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think so many people, especially because they're like, well, how do I know that the therapist I'm going to is like well trained or anything like that? And there are agencies, there are colleges in place just for that reason, so that all of the therapists you have are competent, and they make sure they take a test, they make sure that they follow a standard of ethics.
Yes.
And when so many people understand that and they go, oh, so, because I think so many people think, well, you can just call yourself a counselor. And it's like, no, I wish. I have to pay into a college every year, or like 3 colleges every year.
Right.
And you have to make sure that you are trying to be keeping up with that knowledge base, because so many things have changed. Like even since I've been out of school, I'm going to age myself here, but I've been out of from my graduate degree. I got that 11 years ago. And in that time, so many things have changed in terms of how we view kind of mental health, how we approach things.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that, everyone knows that, these kind of counselors and these therapists, they have to be trained in that stuff. And we do every year. We have a certain number of things we have to like accomplish so that we can keep that.
Yeah.
And so any therapist you go to, whether it's me, whether it's anyone else that's been on the podcast, or like anyone else you go to, it's important that you know that you're going to get a qualified like individual.
Yeah.
And if you don't like that individual, you're always able that you can go to like another person or like another individual as well.
Yeah.
It's not like one size. I met with one and it was horrible. Okay, we'll find another one, right? Like it's the same as any kind
doctor,
of doctor.
right? As well as, I didn't like that doctor. I have heard a few people say that, and I appreciate that you're repeating that, because sometimes someone may have a really bad experience with a therapist, and
especially if they come and talk with me. Like,
yeah,
who the hell is this
we're
guy?
never doing this again, right?
Jeez.
Yeah, you're just like really talking yourself out of a job. I love it. Everyone's like, who's this guy? I don't want to go to him. If you want a good laugh, book with David McPhee.
No, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
If you want top-notch kind of therapy work, don't come here.
Yeah, that's your motto. Below your card, below your credentials, don't book with me. Yeah. But I think that the other thing is, like, yes, therapists have to keep up as doctors, and all those people do too. But as a client, someone that's going to go see one, I think there has to also be awareness and recognition on my part when I'm walking in that I may not like you or whatnot. However, okay, I also have to give it a go again. And if I'm like really not liking all these therapists that I'm finding, at some point I have to also ask myself, like, am I ready for this? Is this more about me than trying to find, someone on Indian Matchmaker to like,
and that's a great point. Yes, sorry, you were saying.
No, go for it. Yeah. Thank you for cutting me off. Finally, someone cut me off.
Just feel bad.
I deserve it. I'm always cutting everyone off.
No, but you see, this is that ADHD part too. Because like, oh, I have a great point.
Yeah.
I like what you're saying, because so many people think, well, if I go to therapy, I should like my therapist, and we have to talk about things, and they have to say that I'm doing everything great. No, a therapist is going to challenge you and say, I'm going to challenge that a little bit. And some people are like, I don't like that. But the whole point of therapy is to improve things.
Yeah.
And so we, and I say we as a kind of a group, because I'm assuming all my other therapists out there are kind of having this as well, where you challenge them, and we do it like in a kind way. We don't be like, you're
an idiot.
You are just
you have no hope.
You're so far gone.
Yeah.
No, but you can challenge people and say, I'm going to challenge, like how I often approach it is I say, well, let me just challenge that last kind of comment you made. You said this, and I try to offer a alternative, or like what do you think that sounds like? Or like if a friend told you that, what would you, because I want them to make I want them to recognize and say, oh yeah, like I am saying that.
Yeah.
Like by me saying,
some insight,
I can't be doing this.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the keys, because that's what the point of our kind of interactions is. It's not to sit there and be like Indian Matchmaker and be like, oh, let's talk about, no, that's great and that's lovely. But my kind of assumption is that they have other friends.
Yeah.
I'm not their friend. We're not going to go and grab a beer afterwards, because 1, it's unethical, and 2, that's not what we're signing up for. We're having a conversation, and you're learning strategies on how to improve things. Because I think what you talked about earlier about being in that cyclical pattern, right? We need to break that.
Yes.
Oftentimes that's what we do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's so important. So I think the key when you're looking for a therapist or someone that you can talk to is can you talk with this person, and are they going to be real? Where you can say the most outlandish thing. And I've had people who have said outlandish things.
Yeah.
Where they want to see, is he going to challenge me?
Right.
And when I do, it's like, oh, okay. And sometimes
it's like being safe though too. When you have people in your circle you can trust, that you can say things and they'll hold you accountable, or say, oh, you're going to cross the line here, don't go that far. And I think when you can have that relationship with your therapist, that can be great.
Absolutely.
And you know, so what for you, for someone that has talked about going to therapy yourself, what strengths did you look for in a therapist? Like, what helped you find a good therapist?
I honestly think it was whoever had like availability.
Slim pickings for you, hey? You're like
no, but I honestly think it's like, because I often say go at least 2 to 3 times, because if you just do one and done, they might be having an off day. As like a person who is a therapist, there are some days where we just don't have it. We don't have the insight that we usually do. And yes, we usually want to make sure we always kind of show up, but some days are not our best. So try and go at least 2 or 3 times and find someone that you feel comfortable with, right? So if let's say you have issues with men, and you were hurt or look abused, don't force yourself to be like, well, I have to find a male therapist. No, like you can find ones that you are comfortable with. Mm-hmm. If you're more comfortable with a male therapist, great. Try and find one, but don't feel like you have to, well, okay, you know, I just got him on a wait list now, so I just got this guy. I can't lose him. You have an option to always find the one you like. There are people that have said to me, you know, I don't find your particular brand of therapy helpful. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I was a first year therapist, I'd be in the bathroom, you know, like in the shower, just crying.
But you wouldn't be crying because it's not manly to cry. So what would you be doing? Punching walls?
Well, yeah, I'll punch in the bathroom wall.
Yeah.
Why would he say that?
Yeah.
But I think it's understanding that I'm not going to please everybody.
Yeah.
And that's very hard, because as a people pleaser, I tend to always want to please everybody, but you have to understand that, like, when you find a therapist, it has to be something that you that you are feeling comfortable with, right? Because you're not gonna, if you can say, oh well, I might be able to be getting over it. Well, why? Like, why would you settle for that? And why would you just not, you know, like, find something that you feel comfortable with?
Yeah.
That you feel like, okay. And then, as you said earlier, like, when, let's say you can't find someone after multiple times, then reevaluate that and say, okay, maybe my standards are a little bit too high. Maybe I'm looking for something that doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that. I think, and back to my question though, what did you look for though? What strengths did you look for in a therapist? Like what helped you with when you were working through your journey?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is I like people who hold me accountable. As you know,
the one that you like,
who hired me and everything like that. Like you know that
I guess you're gonna go there, hey? We never talked about how we knew each other.
Oh, I mean,
I had the privilege of supervising you for a few years.
I just found her on the street and just, you know, she was like, "Hey, you want to do a podcast?" And I was like,
yeah.
No, but I, and again, this is going into my own kind of childhood, but I had a lot of that empty acceptance, like, oh no, oh you are great at this, oh it's okay. And I like people that really challenge me and say, no, like, you screwed up here, man. Mm-hmm. You need to take on accountability for it, and you need to be better.
Yeah. And
I like that. So when I went and tried to find a therapist, my goal was to find someone who would kind of call me out. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first day that I can still see it clear as day, because I was sitting in a chair, and I remember he kind of looked at me and was like, what are you doing? Oh, like, how do you not know what you're doing here? And I think I really like that, because I think that's how I learn. That's how I get called out, where it's like, hey, this is what you're doing wrong. You need to fix it, because then I'm like, okay, and I can focus on it. And chances are I'll do it wrong again, but I'll get slowly better.
That's what we do, right? As humans, we we're prone to make errors, and those errors can be lessons
Absolutely.
if we want to learn from them. And I like that you say that, because I think that's important, is having someone that can hold us accountable, and that means someone that's holding us accountable actually has our back, versus
exactly.
going along with saying you're a great person. I mean, you already know that's great, that's not why you're there. You're trying to get to the bottom of whatever brought you to therapy.
Well, and oftentimes when you always hear that, when you always hear you're a great person, oh no, you're good at that, you start losing the trust in that person, because if they're always saying that you're great at something, well, no one is great at everything.
Yeah.
So then you start realizing that, oh, hey, I'm not as great as these people say I am. And then you have a whole other realization, right? Which is, so finding people that are going to be kind, but, that are going to tell you how it is.
Please be kind and rewind. Right?
I like all these 90s kind of catchphrases you got.
I always think of that saying, well, now I think of please be kind and rewind is like a really good book for trauma and going back to your childhood to make amends with things. I think it's like, be kind to yourself when you go back and rewind and go back to the past. So there's our other book.
There you go. So
we're just writing book. We're gonna have a full
I'm gonna be
series
able
of books.
to retire after this podcast.
We got great books coming out. Like, stay tuned. We got lots of them. Like, lots of them. They're not very long.
Yeah,
they have a lot of pictures.
They're gonna be like one chapter each book.
Some of them have coloring in them.
Yeah,
and some of them are choose your own adventure where you
like
write
a pop-up book.
Yeah. Oh, pop-up books were great.
Yeah.
That's what kept me going. Was if it wasn't a pop-up book, I was like, I don't know if I could read this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of at that place now where I'm going to ask you if there's anything you wish I'd asked you today, or that something you really want to share when you came on that maybe we didn't cover.
I mean, I think I talked in a lot of like a lot of the kind of big questions you had, and I took them on like another whole.
I love it.
Area.
That's great.
But I just I don't think there was anything that you hadn't asked. I think the biggest thing is just what my goal is to get to kind of the reason why the reason why I like that you guys are doing this, because I think it's great to get the word out on things like mental health issues we're still having in and around our area. And I think it's great because you're able to reach such a broad audience here. And so what I'm grateful that we talked about here is a lot of things around kind of the mental health, around the hardships or the barriers to people accessing mental health. We talked about we talked about toxic masculinity, which I think is also huge. So I think it's just great. So I don't think there's anything you didn't ask me. I think the biggest thing that I just want to make sure everyone's aware of is that I'm not trying to tell people that they should get a diagnosis, or they should go for kind of counseling if they don't need it. But I'm just simply saying that being open to new things like that, being open to things, and not feeling bad about who you are. I think that's kind of the takeaway here is just, if you have issues, if you have things, own it, and don't ever feel bad about who you are, because you are a unique individual that has something to offer. So
that's well said.
Again,
I know you're just like saying so many nice things now. I'm going to give you one more thing to say. So at this point, I'd like to invite you to help our listeners with something they can take away. So out of all the things you mentioned that we talked about, what is one thing that the listeners here can maybe go and think about, or even go and do?
Oh, I had no idea you were going to ask me.
I forgot to tell you.
No, I'm kidding. I think just being open to having open kind of conversations about things. I know it's hard, and I don't expect you to walk up to someone on the street and be like, "Hey, I have mental health." No, that's not what I'm saying. But being open with your family, with your friends, and being able to honestly kind of say like, "Hey, I had a really tough day," and being more open around that stuff, because that's how it starts. Like, I mean, there's like I wish I could say that what I do with counseling and therapy is magic, but it's just, honestly, it's taking a keen interest in someone. And I've taken schooling and years on how to take that and work it into something, but really it starts with just hearing and seeing another kind of person. and accepting them for where they are. So I think I would want people to kind of take that away, not only to accept themselves, but also to accept others, right? Which ties back into those other things we talked about around that toxic masculinity and everything like that. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Did I ask you enough? Because probably more the childhood stuff. So
Yeah, like, I mean, so, and again, as I said, I hold no malice against my kind of upbringing or anything like that, I guess. Like I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. Like, it's, my parents were doing the best that they thought would be right?
Yeah.
So their avoidance of talking about like my speech or my mental health or anything like that was coming from a place of, hey, we want him to have a normal life. We want him to have all these normal experiences. Whereas I think nowadays with the like increase in like information we have and the kind of understanding, we're coming from a place more of, hey, we need to open these conversations
be more
up.
transparent.
Yeah, right?
About
like,
it. Yeah.
Now,
did things get bad for you though as a kid?
Oh God,
like,
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, because again, when you have a speech impediment and when it's really, really bad, where you can't even get out a sentence without something, that's just blood in the water at school. I want to be very clear that I wasn't abused as a child, but my dad and my mom would be at a loss and they wouldn't know what to do. So my dad started to adopt this idea that if I was having a hard time trying to get a word out, he would smack me in the back of the head.
Oh, yeah. I've actually heard people do this.
And it helps because what it does is it gets you out of the anxiety. Like, because I did so much research on this because I was like, what the hell is up with that? Like, why? Again, I'm swearing, sorry.
Yeah.
But what is up with that when I would, because that would work. That would honestly work where I'd be stuck on a word. I'd be like, and my dad would hit me and then it would come out and it would be so smooth.
Yeah.
And my dad then, there's obviously like a learning thing that happens. Like, oh, okay,
this
I
works.
hit him and it works.
Like
so,
the Coke.
Yeah.
The Coke worked for a while.
But it's honestly, when you get out of your head, when you get that anxiety, and so when you get hit or when you get that sudden jolt, it's like, you have no room to be anxious, or you get like you're thrust into that fight or flight.
Yeah. And
so then it's okay. We are on edge, and that's why you hear stories about. My favorite is so, as I said earlier, Samuel L. Jackson also has a speech impediment, and it's so funny because the way he got through it was he would just swear, because when you get like, one of the things that fascinates me is that when I get really upset and start swearing, and it is smooth as can be. Like,
you don't stutter when you swear?
No, because you're dealing with an angry emotion, and so my head is in that space of, I'm angry, I'm going to vent this. And so very, very rarely I'll say, do I ever get stuck on a word or where I can't say the right things, because I'm in that moment of, I'm angry, and it's coming from a place of pure emotion. So what he did was he tried to captivate that as, he just starts like swearing a lot, and that gets him over his block.
But is that what caused you to maybe stay be angry? Because you said you had to manage anger issues, but Absolutely. If you're finding success when you're angry, then...
And I mean, that actually might be the case as well. But my anger, I found, was also my untreated ADHD, where I would go from 0 to 100 because I would be so impulsive and so angry and so raw. And if my brain had a chance to just catch up and be like, well, let's think about this, right? Like, this guy kind of cuts me off on the freeway, and I'm like, oh, that mother. It's like, well, maybe he might be driving to the hospital. Oh, yeah, maybe, right? Like, so you have just being able to be aware of that stuff and be aware of, hey, this is an issue, and being able to be open and honestly talk about that stuff and say, yeah, I don't like being angry. I don't like losing my temper, even though I can speak very clearly whenever I lose my lose my noodle. Right. I'm trying not to swear. I don't want to hit the beep
it's very
button.
kind of you, but like I said, it's an explicit. I mean, my logo is a middle finger, so you know when you see that
We've gone past that.
Yeah, and I usually follow the guests. So I've had some guests that I know they don't swear, and so I'm really mindful. So if I have a guest that swears, I'm like, yes, I can too. And I've had guests ask too. They're like, can I cuss? Like, can I swear? And I'm like, yes, you can say whatever you want.
Open up. Open it up.
Like if that's all good. So. Is there any story, are there any stories or anything about your time when you were kind of working through the speech fluency that you want to share?
I think one of the biggest things with anyone who has a speech fluency issue is they often feel like the answer is just not to talk and to lower their presence or lower their, I'm trying to think of the word now and I can't think of it now.
I think presence is a good
lower their light or not shine as brightly because what if I can't talk properly? And then I think there's so many other times where I felt like I wanted to say something but I didn't because it's like, well, no, or there's so many jokes I wanted to tell that I was afraid that I can't really say that punchline or I'm gonna get caught there, and so you hold back. And so I felt like, looking back on that, I felt like that really impacted my spirit because as you and I were kind of talking about it, it's I have a presence, I have this thing, and when you hold back, you're holding back a part of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's really hard. And so looking back on that, it's like I look back on that and I'm like, there's so many things that I missed out on, or so many opportunities that I didn't say the right thing, or there's so many times where I saw an injustice in the world and I never spoke up about it because I was afraid of, well, what if I can't be getting out, or what if I lose interest, or because again, my history, both my parents were in kind of that sales thing. So they always taught me like, like your first impression is most important.
Yeah.
And everything like that. So like if you say the wrong thing, or if you get stuck on a word, or if you can't say it as smooth as you can, that's going to make a bad impression. And I think that's where I get caught up with.
Yeah.
And I still do. Like, I mean, there's still times where even my wife will be like, what are you doing? Like, why are you holding back? 'Cause she knows I'm,
I've seen that too, where you'll say everything's good, everything's fine, and you'll have had a stressful, let's say, moment with a client, and you want to talk about that. However, I think also you think, well, I would imagine you would think, this is my job, I'm expected to do it, I'm fine, but it's like, are you thinking of Ross from Friends right now?
I'm fine. Having a few more of those octaves up. Everything's great.
Yeah. Right, as we laugh at you. But it makes sense though, what the position you were in, and I would imagine too, you also get picked on less. The less you have to say, and if you hide in the corner, wherever it is you're hiding, then you're not the kid that the other kid over there will get picked on.
Yeah. And if you don't talk, then people can't make fun of something that they haven't heard, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's like, okay, well, you're almost weighing the, well, do I want to say this? And then if I get stuck on a word, or if I can't say it properly, am I going to get ridiculed? And like, it's just really that balance.
It's like amazing the anxiety we cause each other as humans, right? Because here's this kid trying to figure out how to talk, or maybe live his life without talking. Like, I don't know if you ever thought, well, I guess this is going to be my life, I'm just not going to talk.
Yeah.
And part of that has to do with your surroundings, those people around you that are causing some of those environmental struggles and anxieties, because you're more worried about, as a pleaser, you're more worried about how that's going to impact them, these other kids at school or adults or whoever you're around.
Absolutely.
And as people, we don't even recognize like the impact we're having on someone in a conversation or in the moment. And I think it's unfortunate, it's sad, but I also think, okay, you're also here and you're talking about it, and you're a therapist who talks. So you
for like
really,
a living.
do you ever look back and feel proud of yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, that sold really well.
I said it really confident there, right?
Yeah, no, the most confident you've been.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just, I really, like, again, there is a part of me that goes and says, oh God, yeah, like I've come so far and I've paved a way for so many other people who have said like you are like a trailblazer and like helping people who have speech impediments and kind of showing that they can be doing this. But then there's another part of me that's like, I lost so much time. Had I known this when I was in my early 20s, heck, even in my adolescent, things would have been so, my life would be such a kind of a different thing. And again, I guess that's I guess that's that hindsight thing, right? Where you can look back and say, oh, had I done this or had I said this, things would be better. But I would not change where I am now. Right. Because I think I had to go through those experiences. Like I had to go through those hard won kind of knowledges where you've learned through that experience, right? Of, hey, I can't say anything. And it's like, well, no, why? Like, because I don't think I would have had that same awareness had I not experienced that. Yeah. If that makes sense. So.
Yeah. And also that, I think, person in that interview that you talked about that challenged that for you, right? Like, it sounds like that was sort of an big aha moment for you too, to be like, what do you mean I need to talk about this? Because I can't imagine how nervous and sweaty and all those things you were leading up to the interview.
Absolutely. Well,
like, how am I like did you drink a bunch of Coke? Did you have your dad smack you in the back of the head a few times? You know, like,
this was when I was 24. So I had been on a number of kind of interviews and I had never had anyone call it out. Like, never, like, because again, my family, we never talked about that.
That's right.
They would see me work through the interview and we just wouldn't talk about it. And then I had this one interviewee and the way he just brought it up so calmly, I was taken back. It was like, and I was like, dude, like, what are you doing? We don't talk about this. Like, like, no, hey, we have an unwritten script here, and you're going off script. And I think that really helped me. And then throughout my time, because I actually took that job, and then throughout my time there, we really worked on that. Where they would honestly be like, hey, let's not use this as a bad thing, but let's use it as a strength, man. And that's where I first realized that, hey, I could, like, this is where you can welcome a vulnerability into the conversation. Yeah. And really start to open things up. Yeah. And that's huge.
That is huge.
So.
That is huge.
And that's where, like, what you said earlier about using it like a superpower is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said it. I just followed you. Well, so thanks for giving me credit for giving yourself credit.
I just, just old habits.
Yeah, old habits die hard. All right. At this point, do you want to drop your plug? Do you want to, if folks like,
roll out the red carpet?
Do you do therapy? If folks are interested in therapy with you, or if they want to get in touch with you,
absolutely. So I have a private practice through Inkblot Therapy, which is based solely online. The reason why I really enjoy this is because it offers low cost to people who may not be able to afford long amounts of kind of a therapy or kind of the counseling. It's a great organization. And but I mean, even if you don't want to go with me, even if you're like, wow, this guy makes a lot of jokes and I don't want to do that, I'd encourage you to find any kind of access to any kind of a mental health worker who can best help you, because I strongly feel that, having these as kind of options is a great way for us to be living our best life. Yeah. And so, So
No, go for it.
So you can look me up on the Inkblot website. I have some availability. I don't want to say I have tons, but I have some. But or feel free to look at a few of the other kind of qualified individuals on there for sure.
Great. And I'll also put it up when we put the episode up as well. You can do that. All right. Okay. Well, I want to thank you at this point for letting me hold you captive for a couple hours. And it's nice seeing you. It's really nice to sit across the table and chat with you and learn about your past. Like I said, we never really got into it at work, and you've been on my mind lately. And I thought that having you here would be an opportunity to write and living live moment to talk about how you live with a disability and how you work through it. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's amazing that, like we said earlier, for someone who wasn't meant to be talking, that's what you're doing for a living. And I think that just sort of sums up you in a nutshell of
Well, thank you.
perseverance.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you for being here, and thank you for making me laugh. It made me laugh so much today. I appreciated that.
For sure. And I mean, I think, as I've said numerous times, I really kind of appreciate you taking on this project and using it in such a way to help other people, because I'm hoping that so many people hear these things. They can hear about all these other episodes that you guys that you have talked about, all these other issues that you're bringing to the forefront, and I think it's helpful for people, right? When they can hear this and they can just take a few hours where they can be like, okay, this is like to be getting lost in this, right? And that's kind of what we want. So
I agree. Thank you for that. I appreciate you saying that.
Well, hopefully now I can get released out of the basement.
Yeah. Not just
call.
yet.
No? Oh, okay,
just one more thing. So for our listeners, as you know, these conversations are door openers. So tell us what you think about this episode, or any for that matter. You know where to reach us. I always remind you, in case you don't, on Instagram, it's at MFU Podcast, or via email, info@mfupodcast.com. Thank you so much, David, and thanks to everybody for listening.